And we're going to end today. Well, we've started in quite a dark place with threats of war from the clown show at Davos and other places. What can we do about it? Let's just look at one potential initiative.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a fantastic conversation last week, I think it was, with a gentleman called Glyn, who runs an organisation down in Cornwall called Seven Concerned Citizens, and I think everyone needs to hear about it. So they've been set up to push back against the globalist agenda, specifically as it relates to net zero. So they're talking here about averting a major planning catastrophe. And they've been going to local councils in Cornwall to question the decision-making process around the implementation of net zero policy. So just to give you the context again, so we know exactly what we're talking about, we're all aware that there's a big global push to transition to a zero carbon economic system. It's being driven out of the UN. It's a big part of the Sustainable Development Goals. It's completely inescapable at the moment. So you can see this amazing article from Chatham House. They're really ratcheting up the fear. Nothing at all sensationalist about this image or this headline from November, which was part of the preamble running into COP28 in Dubai, which we talked about just before Christmas. But it's not just global, as ever, as above, so below, as they say. There's a big global message, but actually where the rubber meets the road is at a local level. And this is happening in the UK right now. It's in our backyard, and it's certainly in your town hall. So this organisation, again, that we've talked about previously, backed by a billionaire, UK 100, has been building a body of local councils to implement net zero policies, to accelerate the implementation of those policies. There was some fantastic work done by the Together campaign to list out all of these councils and to draw awareness to what's happening. So I suggest taking a screen grab of that to see if yours is on there. There's a bunch of biggies: Birmingham Council, Nottingham, Leeds, as well as the ones down in Cornwall that Seven Concerned Citizens have been focused upon. And basically, these councils have signed up to a completely undemocratic process. They're going to implement a bunch of policies against the best wishes and the best wishes of the public and against the public interest, essentially. So what is the issue? Well, the issue is this: the science, TM, around net zero and climate change is entirely being driven by the United Nations, right? And no dissenting voices are allowed to be heard, right? So the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, which is a UN body, is dictating what is and isn't true and what needs to happen on the ground everywhere globally. It's completely inappropriate. This has been driving the agenda at COP. So we can see here Simon Steele, the head of the UN Climate Change Secretariat, the guy that was leading out COP, the main spokesman for that event before the end of last year, says the seventh assessment cycle, so they've already done 6, we're now on number 7. They do them annually. The seventh assessment cycle of the IPCC must serve as a beacon, guiding us towards solutions that are not only ambitious, but also rooted in the scientific realities of our world, whilst at the same time, obviously, creating a $750 million, he didn't say this, I'm saying this, a trillion dollar taxpayer-funded marketplace for global corporations and big consulting firms to make an absolute packet implementing these new, completely untested and unproven technologies. I mean, it's extraordinarily dangerous and risky what they're doing. And also, importantly, the science isn't reliable. It's biased, right? So last summer, back in July, the Clintel report was issued. And this came from 1,800 scientists, including Nobel Prize winners. And we can see from this report, it's a very short report, 7 pages. I suggest you go and read it. It's very readable. You can just see from the charts up on screen there that despite the fact that CO2 levels do appear to be increasing, climate-related deaths are actually going down quite significantly over the past 100 years, right? This is not a pressing issue in terms of human life. And all of the future projections, just like COVID, all of the future projections that the IPCC has been relying on are based on computer models. So they are massively open to manipulation, right? They are incredibly misleading. You can make tiny assumptions and tiny introductions into the data about what we think is going to happen in the future that will have an incredible impact on what the models say, right? You can really get them to do whatever you want, right? So it's a very manipulative way of presenting science. A little quote here from the report. For example, think of the many wrong predictions by economic models, or think of the large mistakes in recent pandemic modeling. The output of the computer models depends fully on the assumptions that model makers put into them. In the past 50 years, the predictions of climate models about global warming and their dire effects have all been wrong. Yeah, they have all been wrong. In the engineering community, they would be qualified as useless, right? But these useless models are being used by politicians and activists to terrorize people. Yeah, so if we look at this recent article from The Guardian, these predictions from the IPCC were used to create a computer simulation of what high tide would look like imbued in Cornwall. So on the left, we have the 2020 average high tide levels. And then on the right, we have 2050. And you can see a whole bunch of infrastructure there has been completely wiped out based on these predictions. And they've used this, and it's not just in Cornwall, that's a local example, but it's happening absolutely everywhere globally, right? This information is being used to manipulate citizens into going along with a whole bunch of climate-related activities, transformations of their way of life, the economic system that surrounds them, that they would not have agreed to if they hadn't been lied to by these citizens and by these activists and by these politicians. And they're also using this, as I've spoken about previously, as a way to bring in things like citizens' assemblies and sortition to make decisions around climate policy. This whole thing is absolutely corrupt. And then into this mix, step 7 concerned citizens, because they want to sort this out. Good on them, right? And in their introduction, they say here that it's an independent, citizen-run effort to support and work with councils, their officers, and our wider community in order to avert a major catastrophe associated with emergency planning and declared emergencies. Right, and essentially what they're pointing out is that local councils, which are basically set up to take your bins out, right? I mean, that's more or less what they're there to do, or activities of similar complexity, are not fit for purpose when it comes to making big strategic decisions about highly contentious advanced climate models that they don't understand, right? It's complete nonsense. And they're doing fantastic work. They're here to point out the system isn't fit for purpose. They've been working with good people inside the councils. Like, there are good people inside the councils. That's really important for us to understand. And they're basically using the bureaucracy and the system against itself. Last year, they started off by presenting. They did 5 presentations to 4 officers of the council, talking about the proposed climate emergency action plan, the implications of the plan for the region, businesses, and its citizens, the fact that council planning systems are not fit for purpose, the pragmatism of the policy, and the nature of the scientific information, its provenance, and where it came from. They organised a protest. So they had 200 concerned citizens. The 7 coordinated 200 to go outside the council offices to do a protest. It was roundly ignored. They escalated this to the CEO of Torbay Council and the head auditor. All right, this is really important. This is about assurance. It's about audit. It's about the structural integrity of these organisations. Right, that they have a duty to respond to information that is sent to them in the correct fashion. Right, so they escalated to the CEO. They sent 4 freedom of information requests. If we just nip back one, actually, sorry. They then reviewed that information. So you can see the process that took place through last year. And then they were told by the council, they actually received a message from the council saying that we have nothing more to discuss with you. And they've then consolidated all of that into a 5th letter, which captures all of the findings and recommendations. And the summary here, which you can see, is essentially that the council is not fit for the purpose of conducting emergency planning and execution. The present organisation system, left uncorrected, poses a significant, elevated, and imminent threat of harm to the well-being of the region and its people. The likely impacts, risks, and unintended consequences arising from the policies and strategies being developed through the current organisation system will have catastrophic implications lasting for generations. Right? Now, that is an absolute nightmare. Or if you're the CEO of a council or the chief auditor of a council, that is the stuff of nightmares, right? This is kryptonite to the bureaucracy. And I think that although it is a bit dry, it's procedural, it's technical, it's bureaucratic, this might work. I think that, well, they're clearly already getting traction. I think that the Torbay and Cornwall councils have got a fight on their hand. They've got some big questions that need to be answered about the decisions that they've made and the process that they've used to arrive at those decisions. And importantly, I think that there is a template here for national action that we've been talking about a lot on the show. And I'm excited to see how this develops over the coming months.
Okay, brilliant. Ben, thank you very much for that. Well, we've got to leave it there for today, perhaps on a bit of good news. We will be back in a couple of minutes for some extra. We'll discuss these issues a bit more. If you aren't able to join us for that, we'll be back at 1 p.m. as usual on Monday. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you then. Bye-bye.